Hello, welcome, cyber people. Mark again. Today, I'm excited to share with you another episode in our incident response series. You're in the right spot if you're looking to learn more about incident response process from someone who works in the field daily. In this video, we're going to take on the containment stage and its importance in a good incident response. This stage is probably one of the more important phases of incident response, if there is such a thing. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for checking us out today. This is going to be great. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out the many blog posts and podcasts from the members of the Security 360 team. And this is a little bit about me, a snapshot of who I am for what I do. For more information about this, you can check out some of the other videos in the series where I get a little more detail about my background. Otherwise, let's jump in and get started in today's lesson. Today, we're discussing containment. Containment is a critical part of the incident response process. It's in my experience, and this is where many companies fall short at the moment of truth when they have less room for error. If you recall from our first video series, the quicker we detect, respond, and contain the situation, the more likely the damage from the threat actor is going to be lessened. And if you haven't seen the first video, be sure to go check it out now. It should come to no surprise that a good coordinated response is going to require some level of planning. It's always best to lay out your goals for incident handling before incidents occur. This can reduce your response time and potentially reduce damage caused so your company can get back to work making money. Some of the things you should have answers for is determine how containing systems may affect their availability and therefore your overall business operations. Now remember, we're a business. When certain systems are down or diminished, it may have a financial impact to the company. You should also figure out how long it typically takes to respond and implement protective controls during investigation. And, if it takes too long to detect or too long to respond, your ability to contain is not very effective. You may find that it's too late in attempting to salvage your systems, depending on the type of attack. That's why sometimes it's a good time to hire a company like Security 360, where we specialize in monitoring, detecting, and responding to cyber incidents all the time. And finally, in the last video, we touched on evidence collection. When responding to an incident, we have to make sure that our techniques don't trample on potential investigative information or evidence. If we come across evidence, we need to lay out how we're going to collect and preserve it so it meets the legal requirements for admissibility in court. One thing to consider, while time may be of the essence during a cyber incident, will how we collect that evidence delay how soon the system can return to production. The threat might be over with, but the evidence collection process may affect other things that we have to take into account. So, quick review. Here we are looking at the primary phase of incident response. We moved on to the containment phase. Some of the steps we may take in containment are system or network isolation, system or user account quarantine. We may monitor the network for malicious traffic. We may uncover preventive measures that will help keep the threat actor out once they're evicted. And this could be things like blocking access to certain applications or IP addresses that we've detected during our investigation. And of course, our friend and ally appears documentation. We need to keep track of what we've done so far in a concise manner. Now that we've identified that something is hostile or suspicious, we've got to react. But how? During incident response, we are constantly making decisions, big and small. For instance, should we isolate or shut down a system? Maybe leaving it running for a while allows us to gather more investigative information, such as potentially other infected hosts that we haven't been alerted on yet. If we keep going, for how long do we keep going? What if we know for sure that a system is in a truly compromised state? What's our threshold before we have to isolate? Who makes that call? During incident response, rules of engagement should be clarified. Things such as when to take a system offline or to go nuclear and shut the whole network down needs to be worked out before an incident happens. Who has the authority to make those calls is also very important. What guidelines do they have to make the call between shutting down one or two systems versus the entire network? We don't want a junior analyst making ultimately what will be a business decision that could affect operations revenue for an entire organization. All of this information needs to be gathered ahead of time and documented. As we mentioned before, it's always better to lay out key decision points and capture them in a document when everyone is clear of mind, calm, rather than trying to shoot from a hip and improvise during a crisis. Uh, Are any of these decision points documented? Things you should get started with is uh, who do you have to make contact to make final decision of things? What powers do they have? And then if you're an incident responder, what powers do you have? What autonomy do you have to make decisions? What guidelines exist to help you make those decisions? What do procedures say that you should do during different stages of the process? And do you have a contact list of system owners and management and other key decision makers and influencers to help you make decisions if it's left up to you? These are all good things they record ahead of time that will definitely help any responder during a crisis. Let's talk about one of the steps you might take during a containment phase, and that's isolation. Isolating systems prevents lateral movement and keeps the spread of whatever's affecting the system from potentially impacting the rest of the network. You can go about isolation by many different means. Going back to the physical side of the house, you could go into the switch or router and manually shut down the interface so there's no more network traffic. You could actually unplug the cable from the back of the device. Some of the more modern solutions for isolation, EDR products have an ability to, in essence, lock down the device so it can only communicate to the EDR cloud and not anything else, which is good for responders to allow them to continue their investigation while the system is running. And that leads us to the next question. Should we power systems off? There might be times where you're going to need to or want to, but keep in mind that whenever you shut a system off, there may be unintended consequences. For instance, volatile memory. There could be a lot of malware or a lot of information about what's going on in the attack that's in the volatile memory. And once you turn that machine off, all that information gets lost. Plus, when a system is on, sometimes it has files locked, and ransomware cannot encrypt files while the system is running. And once you shut down that device, those file locks release, and now the ransomware has an opportunity to go forth and encrypt the data. One of the things we might be doing with isolation is we might try to identify traffic. We might try to see were there any indications as far as compromise, any known executables, any IP addresses that were accessed. And while we're watching this traffic, we have to make the determination: do we want to block the traffic, or do we want to just restrict access to minimize the blast zone, so to speak? Once we find malicious traffic that might be occurring, we want to go ahead and monitor that for continued connections after we put the restrictions in place. For instance, if we put a blocking of an IP address on our firewall, we want to continue to watch the firewall in case some other devices that we may not realize are compromised, if they start communicating to the IP address that we've just blocked, that might be a good indication that something's wrong. Let's talk about an important toolkit that should be involved in incident response, and that's endpoint detection response, also known as EDR. So antivirus and EDR both protect threats against endpoints. There are key differences between the level of protections and capabilities that these tools provide. EDRs provide responders with more tools for incident handling than antivirus alone. First of all, is network containment that we just talked about. Right? This is again, the system is still running, but it's in a protective bubble. It's only being managed through the EDR cloud. So this allows responders to analyze live systems and perform eradication and data collection remotely and safely. EDR is also tied into the kernel of the operating system, which gives it increased visibility to all that's going on in that box, and not just looking at files and processes that antivirus typically looks at. We're looking at processes such as user logons, network connections, DNS requests, process spawning, system changes, firewall changes, memory dumps, security configuration changes, LL bins, PowerShell scripts that are normally run, things that antivirus might not typically detect. And sometimes in a breach, there's no malware. We just mentioned the binaries. Antivirus won't detect that. EDR could detect malicious activity through indicators, activities, indicator compromise, or general threat hunting, whether you automate that, looking for known bad values, or whether you're going to manually hunt for things on your own. Today's threat actors are using more powerful, more sophisticated methods, and typical antivirus just cannot keep up. While antivirus needs to be on an endpoint, know that it's woefully lacking this visibility and capabilities during the response stage. And that's what the R in EDR is for response. And that's what we're talking about today. Now, during our containment, we may have different periods of time for how long we're going to contain a device. First, we might be doing it short term. We immediately responded and we're limiting the damage before it gets worse. But we may have to release that back into production due to the needs of the business. If we're doing any kind of long-term containment, this is where we determine the system can be taken offline, and this is where we start beginning eradication, trying to remove what's wrong. If the system has remained in production after the termination, we've got to apply temporary fixes and techniques the best we can. We need to document everything we're doing during the containment phase and leading in the eradication phase, just make sure that any evidence is collected is preserved and any steps can be retraced. And then finally, when we have a device, when we're doing the containment, we need to have the formal collection of artifacts from the affected systems for analysis. And then we need to be beginning the evaluation of the status of our system backups. If we're starting to release a system back into production, do we have good backups in case there was system corruption, data loss? How quickly can we restore? And these are things we need to factor in to our restoration process. And here we are again talking about documentation. Earlier, we had a lot of questions that we needed to have answers, our go or no-go scenarios. When are we clear to proceed to shut system down or isolate? Who has the authorization to do so? When are things deemed clear enough to release and put back in production? Those are all questions that need to be captured, and eventually you want to start formulate them and putting them in some sort of incident response plan. Again, we want to make sure you know how you're going to track the steps that you've handled, everything that you've done, everything you've touched during an incident. And for all the reasons we spoke before, that you're going to review your actions after the fact as far as what are the lessons learned, what could we do better in the future, what caused this scenario, could the scenario have been prevented, what can you do to prevent it in the future. So the more you capture, the better the learning capabilities are from this exercise. And in closing, remember, when we respond, we need to do so quickly and carefully. Our primary focus is to do no further harm while containing the harm that has already happened. Having the big decisions made ahead of time really helps out in this, rather than trying to figure things out in the middle of the battle. Know your capabilities for containment. Know what your options are. Continue to evaluate how bad is it and what do we need to do to keep it from getting worse. Continue to ask yourself the questions, have we stabilized? Can we move on to the next stage of the process? Or do we need to continue working on containment? And as always, document, document, document every step that you're doing, every step of the way. And that brings us to the end of this episode. We covered a lot of ground today. I hope you found it informative and engaging. If you missed any of the previous episodes, now is the perfect time to catch up. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed today's content and subscribe to stay updated on all of our future episodes. Join us next time we dive deeper and explore the next stage of the incident response process. We've got some exciting content lined up. You are not going to want to miss it. Until then, keep exploring and keep learning. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.